Item number 9, resolution adopting alternatives suppression plan in support of a variance request under CDPHE Public Health Order 20-28 for places of worship. Susan Whelan, Director of El Paso County Department of Public Health, and Dr. Robin Johnson, our Medical Director. And I see our Deputy Medical Director, who I haven't seen in a while. Welcome back.
Good morning, Commissioners. For my weekly visit, some of this might sound like a broken record, but I'd like to just reiterate a few points. Susan Whelan, Public Health Director for El Paso County. I want to introduce some of my staff members that will be speaking today, but also let you know that we do have representatives from the faith-based community that would like to speak, as well as some representatives from the Cheyenne Mountain Zoo as we go through the different variance proposals. As you mentioned earlier, you see Dr. Rob Johnson in the audience, as well as our Deputy Medical Director, Dr. Leon Kelly. We also have Keith Simpson, our Environmental Health Division Director, and Lori Sego, who is part of the County Attorney's staff, who has helped us with the development of these variances, and they're also representatives from the Economic Chamber and Development Recovery Council, who has helped with these variances as well. I'm going to ask that before we started on the faith-based variance proposal, that we have representatives from the faith-based community be able to speak before we get into the details. They do have to leave at 11:30, if that would be doable.
For sure.
Okay, wonderful. So I want to touch a little bit on the past few weeks. So every single week we've been bringing a couple of variances to the Board of County Commissioners and working with community members to develop those proposals. We've experienced successes related to the COVID disease prevention, which the data demonstrates El Paso County, we are doing very well, which we cannot forget that it's due to the diligence and sacrifices of the community members in which they have been made. As we work with our partners to seek additional approvals of variances to loosen statewide restrictions specific to El Paso County, we will continue to urge people to take disease prevention precautions and to keep the disease spread manageable. We will also continue to provide the data dashboard on our website for the community's awareness and provide communication updates if we get close to some of our trigger points. As we approve these variances, then we monitor the data, and there are some trigger points that has been communicated to us through the State Health Department and the Governor that the variances could be rescinded if we don't keep below a certain threshold. We are updating our data dashboard so the public can have an idea of where the data is, and then there's a red line that will show that if we're approaching that, we can do some communication and let the community know where we're at any point in time. We've already kickstarted having limited measured openings of restaurants, and we are focusing on mental health and social well-being variances today with our proposals for places of worship and then also the Cheyenne Mountain Zoo. As we continue to analyze successful variances around the state and also the Utah model, which has been brought to our attention by Commissioner Williams and as well as Commissioner Stan Vanderwerf, we are doing various different analysis on what ideas are working where, not only in the state of Colorado and what has been successful. Taking that information, we will customize portions of that to do what's best for El Paso County with input from our partners as we move forward. We'd like to streamline the process of bringing forth a comprehensive variance proposal to the commissioners with very limited reopening strategies, but we feel that that would be a really good approach that would focus our energy on a comprehensive approach rather than kind of piecemealing some of the variances that we are bringing before you. But I do think that we need to celebrate the success that El Paso County has had with the high school graduations, with the restaurants, and today we have a couple of more variances. But as we've went through this pandemic, there are certain points in time that we need to pivot, and now is that time where we need to pivot. And we will work together with you all to do so, because I know that you have all been actively involved in this process, not only up here on the dais, but also behind the scenes. So I would greatly appreciate the continued support and your help working through even writing some of those variance pieces, which I know that Commissioner Vanderwerf, you've rolled up your sleeves and you've been helping write a lot of variances in cooperation with us, so I greatly appreciate that. So I would continue to work with that process, because our partnerships and the input from our businesses as well as the various sectors, their input is extremely important to the decisions that we make. Public health should be only one sliver of that decision. There are different aspects of the community that relate to mental health and social well-being, as well as the prevention of the disease spread and the health of the economy, all of those aspects. And so that's the collaboration that we've built with the EDC and numerous partners. And I'd like to present on the EDC at some point more comprehensively as well. I'd also like in the future to provide the work that we're doing with resiliency and with working with Dr. Benight, because it's not only about opening up variances, it's about how do we protect the health and well-being of the community, and that's through community resiliency building. So I would like to come before you again and present on the progress and opportunities there. We'll get started with representatives from the faith-based community, and I'll ask Glenn Packiam, who is an associate senior pastor with New Life Church, as well as Yami Molabi, and he is the chair of 'Cause I Love You, and the 'Cause I Love You.
Mobilati.
Molati, thank you. I was just going to say Mr. M, but gave it a try. But there's been numerous faith-based leaders that have been involved in this process, and they come here today to provide some feedback and seek your approval in this variance process. So with that, we'll get started with them, and then we'll go to County Attorney Lori Seago to get to the nuts and bolts of this variance. So thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Mobilati, if you could please state your name, and then you may begin.
Thank you, Commissioner Waller. My name is Yemi Mobilati. Good morning. I guess it is morning still. Distinguished Board of County Commissioners. My primary work in this community is I work as a small business development administrator for the city of Colorado Springs. And before I jump into my comments, I just want to let you know that I'm also a business owner myself. My business partner manages both of our businesses, and we are following all the guidelines and protocols. And I actually had an economic development meeting at a local restaurant yesterday, and I was pleased to see them follow all the guidelines, and they got my information, and they're ready for tracing. So it's working, at least from what I can see, and really thankful for your leadership and helping to get our economy rolling back up in a safe way. But before I moved to this community about 10 years ago, I was actually a pastor. So I moved to El Paso County as a pastor. I started a new church. And while I am no longer in that vocation professionally, I have the blessing of still working with a number of churches and amazing pastor in the community. I serve as the chair of COS I Love You, a nonprofit of a diverse network of churches. I am proud to say that the guidelines for reopening churches has been an inclusive process of a number of diverse churches, including size, faith traditions, and ethnicities. Stu Davis, who is the executive director of 'Cause I Love You, has worked really hard in great partnership with El Paso Public Health to lead this effort. So I speak for Stu Davis, the 'Cause I Love You board, and the entire community of pastors in our network by saying we are committed to mental, spiritual, and the physical health and safety of our parishioners and the wider community as well. And we will pursue this truth by adhering to the minimum set of health and safety guidelines to protect public health, including social distancing, contract tracing, and other public health practices. And I use the word minimum because you should know that we have pastors that actually are choosing to go above what is expected. So not only minimum, we will go above more than what is required. And my heartfelt gratitude to your incredible team, including Susan and Dr. Johnson and Keith, for their wisdom and expertise. They've been incredibly wonderful to work with, and balancing both sides is really important. And to Commissioner Vanderwerf for your encouragement through this process as well. And now Reverend Dr. Glenn Packiam from New Life Church will give a few comments.
Dr. Packiam, if you could, please state your name and then you may begin.
Thank you. My name is Glenn Packiam. And like Ross Geller and friends, I'm not that kind of doctor, so we should just get that out of the way quickly. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a privilege to speak to you on behalf of the churches in Colorado Springs and in El Paso County. I did find it slightly humorous that the two variances being considered today are for churches and for the zoo. I get those two places confused myself. Maybe this morning is where the wild things are. I would like to thank, first and foremost, our El Paso County public health officials. They have been a joy to work with, and I know they have worked ridiculously long hours, crazy schedules to protect and serve the community that we all love. And for all of them, this is not a job, this is a calling. And so I just want to express, on behalf of the faith community here, our deep gratitude. The Christian community in Colorado Springs has not always represented the heart of Christianity well. I've lived in the city 20 years. I am an immigrant from Malaysia, and I have lived in different parts of the states, became a citizen about 11 years ago. But Colorado Springs is the longest I've lived anywhere in the world. And I know that the Christian community here has not always represented the heart of Jesus well, but the call of Jesus remains clear: to love the Lord with all our heart, soul, mind, and strength, and to love our neighbor as ourselves. And we believe that part of loving our neighbor and loving our city is to seek its flourishing and its well-being. Now, well-being in our view, flourishing in our view, is a comprehensive picture. It's not just physical health, but it's also mental, emotional, relational, and spiritual health. And this is one of the ways that we feel that places of faith and churches can contribute. We can ground people in a deeper purpose and a greater meaning. We can help people locate themselves in a story that is bigger than themselves. We can help them belong in a new kind of community that tears down divisions. We can help people know that they are not alone, that they are loved by a love that is stronger than death, that they are loved by a God who cares, who weeps, and who won't let them go. We have made, in our church, we have made 10,000, we've called 10,000 households in the last 3 months. And we know that our community is hurting. There's a lot of people who are lonely, who are angry, who are confused. There are many who have lost jobs and businesses. Others are grieving the losses of big celebrations, weddings, graduations. I did a COVID-compliant wedding with masks a few weeks ago. And the church is called to be a safe place to help people find healing. The church is a place where people can hear good news. And I know, again, I'll speak for churches, but I know this is true for many communities of faith. The church in El Paso County has never really been closed. We've been dispersed. We've been serving in a myriad of ways, delivering groceries, sewing masks, and a ton of other things as well. In fact, New Life, we're grateful to have been able to donate and deliver 6 tons of groceries to our own community. But a church is not simply out there in action. It's not, to use a Christian term, it's not just the body of Christ, it's a family. And communities of faith are meant to be a family. And so when we talk about places of worship, I want us to consider that families need a home to gather in. Families need a place where they can make meaning and share their life together. And so we believe the time has come for churches in El Paso County to gather together in a safe and responsible way. And we've tried to work very hard with our public health officials and with other pastors to make sure this proposal is right. Finally, I just want to add that as Christians, we are people of hope, and we are so grateful for the opportunity to carry hope to this community, the kind of hope that can bring healing and life. Like all places of worship and communities of faith in this county, we are in the city for the sake of the city. And so it's with that in mind that we submit our proposal to you today. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Who do we have next? Susan, Dr. Johnson, do you want me to open it? Lori, okay, Ms. Seago.
I apologize for being on the phone. I'm trying to email Commissioner Bremer the plan. She's not able to access it online, so if you'll give me just a sec. My name's Lori Seago. I'm a senior assistant county attorney with the El Paso County Attorney's Office, and I serve as legal counsel to El Paso County Public Health. What I wanted to do today is simply go over in brief the elements of the alternative plan for places of worship in El Paso County that we intend to submit to the state for their approval. If I can have the overhead, please. For those of you that are present in person, I've provided you a red-lined that contains one or two changes that came from Commissioner Williams. We're certainly open to additional suggestions from the other commissioners. But as the public health order stands today, places of worship are open, but they are required to provide services in groups of 10 or less in compliance with the provisions of that order. So what we are proposing today is that places of worship be able to provide worship services and other similar services, and they're listed there under Section 1, things like Sunday school, youth services, and Bible studies, to their constituents, but that occupancy within a facility be limited to 25% of the fire occupancy load. It's also the intent that the various types of services that may be provided at different times, so that you don't have a child's Sunday school going on at the same time as your main worship service, and then everybody's exiting and entering at the same time and milling around in the hallways. We'd like those to be staggered as much as possible, as you can see there in the proposal. So Section 2 there covers seating capacity within the facilities themselves, requires that, again, occupancy be limited to 25% of the fire occupancy load, that seating be structured so that 6 feet can be maintained between individuals or groups, and we're asking that groups seated together be limited to 10 people and consist of either your immediate family from the same, members of your household or your consistent social group. We're encouraging, not requiring, we're encouraging places of worship to obtain contact information from one member of each group that's seated in case it becomes necessary if an outbreak does occur. Section 3 covers policies regarding attendance and participation in services. We are encouraging places of worship to make separate facilities within the main facility available for vulnerable individuals who can participate in the same service, but in a different way, perhaps remotely through a television screen or other means, to try to protect them. And those individuals are encouraged to participate in that manner. Attendees are encouraged, not required, but encouraged to wear cloth face coverings when inside if they can't maintain that 6-foot social distancing, or if they're singing. And I'll allow Dr. Johnson to address briefly why singing may present a greater risk than just simply standing next to someone and breathing normally. We're discouraging participating in handshakes, hugs, other types of close physical contact. We're asking that when attendees enter or exit, it be done in a way so as to minimize the mingling of and close contact of people. Moving on to public health practices. Again, I don't want to go over each of these, but if you have a question, please stop me. Section 4 covers public health practices within the facilities. It does require staff to wear cloth face coverings over their nose and mouths unless they are directly providing a ministry or singing. They're required to post signages regarding hygiene. Congregation in common areas is prohibited. No food service may be provided. Increased cleaning and disinfection is required. And doors are encouraged to remain open to allow maximum ventilation and airflow. Regarding the use of sacraments in those types of facilities, some protective measures are put in place. Prepackaged single-serve items may be provided, but it may not be distributed through the passing of plates or other items that will be touched by numerous people. In addition, offerings cannot be obtained by passing such items from person to person to person, but if there's a single collection bucket or plate, then people can simply drop something into it as they pass by. And then the remaining provisions you have seen before. They were included in our variance request for restaurants, and they contain just generalized procedures. Paragraph 6 talks about facilities that may have been closed over an extended period of time. These are just some sanitary measures that they should take before reopening again. Paragraph 7 provides requirements regarding attendees who may come to the service exhibiting or reporting COVID-like symptoms and the steps that staff are instructed to take if that occurs. And then finally, if an outbreak occurs, which is defined as 2 or more probable or confirmed COVID cases within the facility in a 14-day period, then they are required to notify public health immediately and close long enough, if requested by public health, to implement the measures that may be necessary to make the facility safe once again to open up. And again, that would be done in coordination with public health so that we can ensure that they're closed for the minimum amount of time necessary for safety. And that's it. Does anyone have any questions?
Any questions? Okay, go ahead. Commissioner Gonzalez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I've been brought up for about a month ago, so it's just something. I'm just very happy that at this point, the only thing I did see was I did receive an email from a pastor, I think we all the commissioners did, regarding the portion, I believe it's 5, on the use of sacraments. For many faiths, the communion is perhaps considered the most holy part of their service, not all, but for many. And the pastor was concerned of us instilling a mandatory restriction on the communion and how they handle the communion. And so I kind of feel that might, how somebody could feel that's an infringement on that very holy aspect of it. So, I mean, I would just recommend that a statement, and then maybe the shall be, should. I know shall is I believe a mandatory versus a recommendation. If there's maybe one change to that sentence, again, that was from a pastor's input that one part was considered pretty holy, and for us to make a mandate on how they should handle communion was maybe a step too much for us, restriction too much, and so I would consider that, or ask that be considered as a one-word change.
I appreciate that, Commissioner Gonzalez, and I'll defer to the Public Health Director and the Medical Director as to whether they feel that can be supported.
Thank
Understood.
you. And before we do that, I see some head nods, but I'd like Dr. Pacquiam and Mr. Mobilade, or one or the other, to maybe come back up, and I'd like to hear opinions on that, please.
Thank you for that, and thank you for that, Commissioner Gonzalez. Yeah, that is a concern that some pastors have talked about. It's really about the language of mandate versus encourage, and so if it is strongly encouraged, then we're glad. Again, and I think, as Yemi said, for many of us in the faith community, we're happy to go above and beyond. Our own church is not going to start out with communion. However, we also practice weekly communion, and it would be a better precedent to not have language that mandates how sacraments are administered.
Thanks. Hang on one second. Mr. Mobilade, do you have anything to add to that? Okay. Commissioner Vanderwerf.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I do have some other comments on the document that I'd like to reserve to say later, but on this particular topic, I support the concept of making sure the phrasing can be interpreted by the public where it is highly encouraged as opposed to mandatory. And I would like to actually make the point that I think even under those conditions, I don't know what the level of compliance would be, but probably would be something on the order of 90-95% people willing to do these kinds of things. So what this would do in changing the words is we get a vast majority of compliance with it anyway, but for those few that have grave concerns about it, this gives them a pathway in order to be supportive of this variance request and continue to go forward. So that would be my interest as well. Thank you.
Thank you, and I have briefly had an opportunity to run your suggestion by the Medical Director and the Public Health Director, and they both support that change, recognizing that particular, the use of common touch items is particularly risky, but yes, they do support changing the language from shall to strongly encouraged to engage in that practice.
So on page 2, section 5, use of sacraments, 5A communion currently says shall not be distributed, and we are simply going to change the word shall to should not be distributed by the passing of plates. Is that the change I understand, Commissioner Gonzalez?
If the public understands should is a recommendation legally, which it is, but if the language is better as a recommendation, then I'm fine with either. I just want to make sure it's received by the pastors, understood, that they understand it.
Okay, Commissioner Vanderwerf, it looks like we've got some language here.
Yeah,
It works.
thank you, and perhaps I can defer to that. I do want to just refer to 5AI. There is a word required, and under that case, perhaps the word encouraged, highly encouraged, also can be used. There's a couple of places where it might need to be necessary to make it clear.
Continue because it simply requires you to minimize it.
Right.
It doesn't say abolish it or abandon it, to minimize the handling of the elements involved by anyone other than the participant. So I think even though the word required is used, it's requiring a best practice rather than a specific procedure.
If I might,
Commissioner Vanderwerf.
thank you. I appreciate actually that response. I think I can accept that, but I also think it is important that you made the statement about that it's basically, the word required is in there, but it's really an encouragement of a best practice so that that can be established on public record as the recommendation. Thank you.
Gonzalez.
I'm sorry, could you read it?
Sure, I'll
I'm
read
not
it
sure
out
if it's
loud.
backwards. Okay.
Yep, it would say, worship are strongly encouraged to distribute communion by the passing of plates, etc.
I think not distribute communion by passing of plates.
Yep, you're right.
Okay,
Good catch.
thanks.
Okay. All right. Okay. Well, do we want to hear from Dr. Johnson first? How are we doing this?
I think if you have any other proposed changes or questions about the actual requirements, I'd like to address those, and then, if that's okay with Dr. Johnson, and then have her come up and
Okay, perfect.
address you.
Commissioner Vanderwerf.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I did it wasn't possible to give much of a pre-notice on this, but I did share it just before the meeting. The word alternative suppression plan, there may be a need for those words in certain circles with regard to presenting these plans, but I think the word suppression does have another meaning to other people, and I am recommending we change one word and then carry that throughout the document where the word suppression is used to call it the El Paso County Alternative Opening Plan for Place of Worship. In essence, that's really what it is, and it's my perspective that it's really just a perspective concept here for certain folks in our society with regard to that word, and I don't believe that my sense of it is there will be no pushback from the state about changing that single word, because it doesn't do anything about changing the content or the proposal itself. It's just a single word. And there are a few places where the word suppression is used, so it would be a change of that word throughout the documentation.
And public health supports that.
Okay, excellent, thank you.
Any other changes? All right, well, seeing none.
Robin Johnson, Medical Director of El Paso County Public Health, and I want to thank you for the opportunity to present to you today these two variances. There is a little overlap in some of the presentation from the public health perspective, so I will speak to it with this first variance, and then speak to some of the specifics around the zoo as the second is presented. But we can revisit any of these points at any point in this presentation that you would like some clarity. So as Lori has mentioned, we have the two variances. The first references places of worship, and the second will be for the Shan Mountain Zoo. And we are here for your review today due to the tremendous efforts of our community leaders in these arenas, our environmental health team in leading the discussions, our public health team's tireless and daily efforts in disease mitigation and trending of our data, as well as our hospital partnership in review, which has been completed. I will review with you some highlights quickly of the variance development, points of progress, and why we are still poised as a community and public health to respond to increased interactions represented in these variances. So the places of worship, these were written in collaboration, as you've already heard from Cause I Love You leadership in the church communities, several individual leaders weighing in with Mayor Suthers, and review of other major variances around the states, including not only what has been going on in Colorado, but Texas, Oklahoma, and some other states that we were referred to for developing some best practices. As we all know, we're building this plane as we fly, and so we are developing some best practices from learning from others and successes, and perhaps where they maybe were not as successful. This has led to a very collegial and robust conversations with discussion of risks and benefits and finding a way forward in collaboration. With that input, we have asked for 25% fire occupancy load, continued public health 6 feet of social distancing, and ongoing preventive measures of encouragement of masks, hand hygiene, increased cleaning of surfaces. There is a focus on prevention of congregating in halls or foyers, etc., and continued encouragement of higher risk individuals to utilize virtual options for worship and decrease in some of those communal practices with options for hand-free communion offering and other things that you've heard from Lori. The underlying principle of following risk of spread of COVID-19 is viral exposure over a period of time. Social distancing rules are really designed to protect individuals from brief or outdoor exposures, and the intent of any protective measure is to not allow time or contact to achieve viral infectious loads. However, allowing people to congregate in a closed space over time carries some inherent risks that must be acknowledged by those choosing to participate, despite any protection inferred from preventive measures in the variance. And public health will continue to assess with their partners in close conversations how this is working in their environment, and for the people, how the airflow is present and length of time, etc. And at this time, the data from El Paso County demonstrates some increasing incidents in COVID-19 in our community, and we referred to this yesterday at the Board of Health. And so if there is interest, I'd like to just present a couple of those graphs so that we can see where we are and why we believe we're poised to continue moving forward.
Please.
So the first one that I have here, and these will be included with our variance to the state for their knowledge. I love overheads. It reminds me of being back in grade school. So you can see here that there are 2 graphs, and the first one at the very top is the requirement from the state to ask us to keep our incidence per 100,000 over a 14-day rolling time period. This is what Director Whelan referred to will be on our webpage for public to be able to follow along with us. And that blue line is where we are presently, and looking at the orange is where we need to avoid before we would begin seeing some needs for maybe backtracking. The beautiful thing about doing some of these variances that you have had the insight to do stepwise is that this will not require an all or nothing. We can follow some of those outbreaks, see which sectors maybe need to step back a little bit, see which ones are safely moving forward, and continue to engage in viable and active, vibrant community. The second chart that I want to bring your attention to is our incidence. And while we see that blue line, we see early on we had a steep climb in the number of COVID cases and the concomitant increased hospitalizations that you can see below that. As we had the stay-at-home order come in to place, both of those began to drop off until we got to the point where we see the ability to begin opening. And as we have opened, we see that our incidence is increasing again. And we're just about where we were before, but we don't see it translating into hospitalizations, nor do we see it translating into fatalities. And this is what we had talked about earlier on, is how do we protect those more vulnerable populations? How do we move forward in a way basing off of what we do know from previous viruses, previous information, and as we're gaining information about this particular novel virus. And part of that reason is, and this is another little more complex graph that I would like to share, is the shifting trends of our demographics. And I apologize, my printer didn't give it as much distinction as would make it easy to see on this. But as you can see, back in March, and we were really looking at our demographic being distributed most heavily in our older populations, and particularly it's that 70 to 79 year age range, which is particularly at risk for hospitalization and more severe course. As we have been opening, we see that shift. We've had more testing. We can test more widely in the community. We have plenty of capacity for that testing if you are just exhibiting symptoms. And that gives us the opportunity then to put out those fires quickly. But we see that shift into our younger population, particularly, you can see that 20 to 29, it actually goes 20 to 40 age range. And this is the age range in which our population really can tolerate this infection without the severity that we see in some of those older populations. We are still tracking what this means as far as immunity that is inferred from that infection, how we can continue to kind of capitalize on this experience. But for now, this is actually what we in public health would have wanted to be seeing as we step into these next times. So I believe, as Director Whelan has referred to, the time for this pivot is appropriate, and we will continue to monitor this and update you. You'll be able to find it on the website, but also more details anytime that you have interest. We're happy to continue to discuss that with you. So, so far, we are in that balance point, right, that we've been seeking for, to continue forward with economic and community integration with the best health practices that have been implemented. So we continue to see those adequate testing resources, the hospital bandwidth to respond. Public health has ability to investigate cases is stable, and we're increasing our bandwidth to meet potential demands because we are seeing some increased incidents. There's more cases, but those cases are more complex. They have more, contacts per case. So we still must have public collaboration in these efforts if we're to stay ahead, capitalizing on our present achievements. And I would hope we would continue to build on this foundation. It is a strong one, and I think we can move it forward. I'm asking you to assist us with the messaging as we move forward in mutual trust, that we can only do this in collaboration. And we are here to be partners with our community. I take very seriously that I am medical director, not only of our county, but that isn't just this organization. It is not just county government. It means that each citizen here, I have a responsibility to their agencies, whether that's a business or a hospital. I have my privileges at all the hospitals because I am their public health director, as well as yours, not only as individuals, but as the Board of County Commissioners. And so in that mutual trust, that my goal and my mission is to protect the health. That also means on those other levels we've talked about in the past around social determinants, whether that means helping our community to find behavioral health and spiritual protection by through our communities of worship, food security, housing and job employment. All of these factors come together to the core of human flourishing and what it means to have health as an individual and a community. So with this in mind, the requirements set forth may require revision as we learn more from ongoing data produced for multiple sectors that we are experiencing changes in, these restrictions. We are anticipating that we may be moving forward, and we may move back a little bit. There's going to be a dance to this, and the relationships that we have built, I've been speaking with our faith leaders. Those relationships have been probably my biggest delight in this whole process, because we'll have the opportunity then to address these as a community and in that relationship. And so We believe that this is the time that we can address this in a timely and responsible manner, and look forward to the opportunity to move into this next stage together. So with that, I guess I've taken that off. Are there any questions that you would have for me?
Well, I was just going to say, I thought, getting to interact with delight and all. Take it that it's the faith-based community. So
I did misspeak. I forgot about that. I've been so overwhelmed.
Commissioner Vanderwerf.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Dr. Johnson, actually, I appreciate your data presentation. It's actually very insightful. I think in particular talking about where the COVID-19 loads are located by age group over the last 3 months, and the presentation of that data and what it can do from the point of view of how we go forward using data in order to provide a proper balance between both safety and getting the economy back up and running. So I just want to express my appreciation for the presentation of that data. And there was in your statements perhaps a little bit of an appeal to continue and enhance collaboration and partnerships. I will do my part to work with that. I can say, and I feel very strongly about this, this community has been doing everything it can to do that. In the process of the different industries that have been working with public health on getting variances submitted, I know there's been very thoughtful and open and frank discussions and a negotiation, and the willingness from all parties to bend and flex a little bit that can get us to a place where we can have a balance between getting the economy back up and running and dealing with this in a safe way. I'm just very, very proud of all of the participants that have been part of that. It speaks to this community. It speaks to the citizens that we have here and their willingness to work together to continue to go forward. I am thrilled and excited by that and humbled by it. And then the last point, and it is not perhaps something that you mentioned directly, Dr. Johnson, but it is something that the executive director mentioned, Susan Whalen, this concept about perhaps it is time, particularly when you see the data, to do a little bit of a pivot, to think a little bit more about a broader-based strategy approach. As always, keeping safety in mind, but I look forward to that pathway going forward. I do believe that is very important because all of us have had to live with the challenges of the variance process. It's not been easy on anybody, and I think there is value in the consideration for that broader strategy, and I look forward to working with public health and the industries in our community to achieve that in a successful and appropriate way, one that gives us the best possible outcome that we can think of. So thank you very much for your presentation.
If I may comment on that, I have to say that our data is due to Director Whelan's foresight in developing our data and analytics so that the work that our CD team, Communicable Disease and Epidemiology, does can be put into a presentation with trending. For our I have to tell you, sometimes I look at certain graphs like the one where the incidence is climbing, and that makes my blood pressure go up. But then when you put it in connection with the other, and you go, oh, but wait a minute, this is what we anticipated, and we actually are achieving that demographic shift that we needed to see, it helps me to then take a deep breath and continue like, yes, let's stay the course. And my anticipation is because of that office, we will be able to track this data in a way that is meaningful. And when we do need to put up before we get to red flags, we can put up a yellow and say, let's have a conversation about what this means. And we are developing enough relationships too, that dialogue, that robust dialogue and push and pull between organizations, we will welcome those conversations so that we can continue this movement forward. So thank you. I just want to make sure that you know that the data is built on those and the infrastructure that you guys began building a year ago in the support of public health. So due to that foresight, we are able to do what we need to today.
Thank you.
Awesome, thank you. Anything else for Dr. Johnson? Seeing none, thank you, Dr. Johnson.
Thank you.
Susan, any other participants in your presentation? All right, what I'm going to do then is open it up for public comment. Is there anybody in the public that would like to comment on this variance in some way? Please come down, state your name, and then you may begin.
Deborah Stout Meininger, community advocate, citizen scientist. Just for the statement I'm going to make, I am a Catholic, always have been, always will be. So this is near and dear to my heart as well. But it's something that should be out there for all places of worship. So that's where my beginning starts. On this item that we have, I feel that it should be no more restrictive than the big box stores, which is mentioned in here previously, and restaurants. When it comes to in-person services, it should say 50% instead of 25% of those parameters. And outdoor services are not covered, that they are allowed to be in person as well. Also, structured restrictions should not be in place forever and ever, amen, since no end date or review date to remove is listed in this documentation that I see in any version. Given that some elected officials, like our beloved Governor Polis, seems very towards the position to micromanage all our choices of the people indefinitely into the future, because that seems to be his calculations. That's a big concern on my part when it comes to our freedom of religion. Based on the actions of the governments in Europe, and to quote President Trump, who seems to be in a like mind, vaccine or no vaccine, we should be going forward. Never again to shut down our economy or our churches, in my mind's eyes, just for a virus. We've not shut those down, or our economies or our churches, in the past. Churches have always been a very important item in our life, and to keep the stability of the people when they're going through a crisis. It should have been one of the top 10, not one of the last things to be addressed. I'm glad that our county commissioners are addressing it now, but I am sad that even at the federal level, that this is one of the last items, not one of the first ones. Makes me sad. Hopefully we don't do that going forward. Thank you.
I understand that we have Stu Davis on the line. Is he ready to go? All right, I'll take any other public comment in the audience, please.
I am here.
Oh, we got Stu Davis. Mr. Davis, if you could state your name and then you may begin.
Yes, good morning. I'm in Tulsa, Oklahoma. This is Stu Davis. I'm the executive director of 'Cause I Love You. Yemi went earlier. I hope that you can hear me. My internet connection is not ideal. But I just wanted to, first of all, express my sincere gratitude and thanks not only to the county commissioners, but to Susan, to Dr. Johnson, to their team for, as Yemi said, a lot of long hours, a lot of diligent hard work to help us get to this particular point. I think it's really important, and this has been an attempt for us to try and build trust and partnership with between our faith community and our local leaders. And so I think that this is an important process. I think the woman that just spoke brought up an interesting point, and I just wanted to say that this document is intended to be the beginning of a phased process that would allow us as a community, and in particular our faith community, to start building towards getting back to what many people enjoy as the expression of a gathered group of people who share a common faith. And so this is not the end-all, be-all document. This is simply the beginning of a pathway. And as I've mentioned to Commissioner Vanderwerf before, to several of the others who have spoken, I've felt like it's important for us to provide a pathway for those churches who are trying to get back to welcoming their congregations again. Because if we don't, then people would start to maybe cut their own. And we all know that that would be even more dangerous. And so this is the beginning of a pathway. And I think the thoughtfulness that's gone into this document is certainly not complete, and it doesn't get us back to whatever the new normal might be. But it is certainly something that allows us to do something moving forward that does build trust and allows us to place a proper value on the role that faith plays amongst our community members. So I just wanted to say thanks for your time, for your effort, and for considering this as thoughtfully as you have.
Thank you. Anybody else in the audience like to speak on this matter?
Mr. Pace, Woodman Hills Metro District. So here we are again, standing at a podium with 3 minutes to discuss why we're asking for permission. Apparently, the last 19,000 times I showed up here, people aren't listening. First off, I'm kind of an atheist, so we'll leave it at that. But I do believe in one thing. You don't mess with JC. You don't mess with a house of worship. And you don't piss up your own chimney. And that's exactly what we're doing here. Again, we're asking the governor to give us permission to do something that if people want to do it, they're going to do it anyway. But going after churches is something even I won't do. I mean, I went to church when I was a kid. I got confirmed when I was a kid and did all the churchly things when I was in the military. So I'm just trying to figure something out here. Isn't it freedom of choice? Aren't we supposed to have the ability to have the choice whether we want to go to church and sacrifice our own safety for whatever we want to do? Freedom of religion. Okay? Someone said the word risk. Let's talk about risk for a minute. America is nothing but a risk, and if you're willing to take that risk, there's a reward on the other side. If you want to risk going to church, the reward is you get to speak with JC or your priest or a pastor and meet with other people in the congregation to assemble peacefully, right? Isn't that what we're supposed to be doing? But then you want to cut the church down into a size that's applicable because someone said we could. At some point, those people that want to go to church are going to fill those churches, whether they're sitting 6 inches apart or 6 feet apart. I believe that if they want to risk their safety to do that, they should have the ability to do it. Oh, that's right, it's freedom of religion. Then you have the right to peaceably assemble and a whole bunch of other things that the governor just isn't understanding because he's got too much money and not enough brains to go with it. And how is that? Well, how do we fix that problem? It's called the voter box. We go up there and we remind him that we have the ability to shut him down, just like what we're doing here. Now, you folks are doing a commendable job given the circumstances that Captain Dictator up there is telling us how to live our lives, and I don't believe in that. I'd rather go have a talk with him that would last probably 30 seconds, get me in a lot of trouble, and probably adorn me all the adoration or admiration of other people. But what are we doing? We're not living up to what we said we would do as Americans. That's it. So I'm just trying to figure out, when are we going to do that? We shouldn't be asking him to do anything, especially with a place of worship. I can understand the Costco's of the world and commercial businesses. Well, we're talking about religion, and I'm fairly certain that the people that go to church understand the risk in going to church. I have no problem standing two inches from somebody that wants to put a wafer in their mouth when it's time to do that. If I want to get sick, that's my business. Why is it yours? Thank you.
Is there anybody else in the audience that would like to speak on this matter? All right, seeing none, I'll bring it up here for deliberation and a vote. Is there anybody that would like to kick us off?
This is Commissioner
Go ahead,
Williams.
Commissioner Vanderwerf.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This particular alternative opening plan, I think, is very, very important. I am a person of faith. My dad was a minister. My grandfather was a minister. My great-grandfather was a minister, and I have a line of ministers in my family that goes back to the late 1600s. Faith is critically important to our personal well-being. There is so much in faith about a personal relationship with your God that is so important to all of us. There are many ways to practice that faith. Doesn't necessarily have to be an in-room meeting location because you can practice faith in so many different ways. But for some people, that particular approach is very, very important. So there's this esoteric aspect to it that I think is so important. And then there's a little bit more, and it has been mentioned. I think Mr. Mobilata mentioned it. The mental, spiritual, and physical parts. The value that being in a congregation of faith with other people that believe in the same thing that you believe in, and the value that that generates for people for their own personal health and the health of our community. That is critically important. So I believe myself deeply in God, and I believe in the right to practice our faith. As a result of that, notwithstanding the challenges of the variance process that has been presented to us, and my concerns over the unsustainability of that kind of process, I am interested in supporting this variance and going forward. I think it is important for our community. And I don't know if you, Mr. Chair, if you are ready to accept a motion. I can hold off on that for the moment, but I would like to make the motion.
Please, go ahead. You can make the motion.
I would like to make the motion to approve the El Paso County Alternative Opening Plan for Places of Worship with the items amended as stated previously, the changing of the word suppression plan to opening, and the changing of the section 5 regarding sacraments to make it encouraged as opposed to required. And we went through those words and have accepted a set of words already in advance, and that is my motion. Thank you.
Is there a second?
This is Commissioner Williams. I will second that.
All right, thank you. And do you have anything else to add, Commissioner Williams?
Just a few comments. Our church had instituted greater home-based scripture study over the past 2 years, which apparently was done with some foresight. And so we've been doing our home-based meetings on Sundays now since the 1st of March, and they've been nice. But I really, really do support us being able to get back with members of our faith, and I'm really excited that this is one of the very first things we're considering after the restaurants and the high school graduation. So I'm very, very excited to approve this resolution and excited for the members of our faith community to be able to exercise their First Amendment rights as is their right to. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Bremer, do you have anything to add?
I do, thank you. Since Commissioner Williams beat me to the virtual punch there, I will third this, and with much excitement, and she said it very well as well. You know, I do think it is significant that the 2 variances we have approved and had approved at the state level prior to this, and the 2 that we're seeing today, were the result of incredible community collaboration and collaboration with the very entities that have felt hit hardest in this. You know, it was the industries coming forward with their own proposed solutions. And I've said it before, I'll say it again. We're in a difficult policymaking role here, and it's always incredibly helpful, A, when people are working together, and B, when they come to us with very practical, reasonable solutions that help us move the pin a little further. And so for that, I'm incredibly grateful. And I also want to point out our health department's role in that. You know, we're fortunate to have public health officials who will stand up here and tell us that while their role is public health and to immerse themselves in the data that can be quite scary, we are very fortunate to have public health officials who understand that there's a much bigger picture to this as well. And I think Director Whelan even said today that we realize that public health should be one of many aspects considered as we move forward. And I just, as a commissioner, I so appreciate that perspective and that recognition of the reality that we're dealing with in a larger policy-making role. So kudos to Director Whelan, Dr. Johnson, and Dr. Kelly for getting this to a place that that is amenable to everybody. And I am very, very happy that we will be voting on this today. So thank you for all the work that went into preparing this and having it ready.
Thank you. Mr. Vice Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I too just want to thank all the hard work, all the meetings and collaboration on bringing this forward. I think everybody knows that I'm a person of faith, and I wish this would have been sooner. I wish this could have been a little bit more. I have concerns of the governor's overreach in keeping churches closed while opening other sectors of the state. Greatly disturbed me. But everybody knows I'm a Sunday school teacher. I'm a lecturer at my church. I could not look at myself in the mirror if I thought people were to think that Lohimus Gonzalez was not supportive of his church communities and the communities of faith. So even though I wish this was more, I'm going to be very supportive of this because this is one of the areas that people are believers. This should be our first priority, not the 10th priority of the state. And so I'm going to give the support. Again, I wish it was a little bit more, and I apologize that it's not. But I want our churches to feel that we have their support, that we're supporting them. It's a slower than I'd like, but I think we're doing a good job and great leadership. I think in pushing, because there have been some difficulties at the state level in having to reopen some of these things, even the ones that we hold most dear. So thank you, and I'll be supporting.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I think this one's crucially important for us moving forward. I'm kind of picturing in my mind all of this variance process as a little bit like a snowball that's rolling down the hill. I'm hoping it picks up momentum, it gathers steam, and we are able to show and prove that we know how to do things in this county, and more and more and more things can be open as we move forward. And I hope that those things happen sooner rather than later. It sort of boggles my mind that people still refer to this as somehow us asking permission from the governor to do things that we have the right to do. The branches of government, we have checks and balances in place. We have the executive branch, we have the legislative branch, and the judiciary, and they're the ones that provide the checks and balances for each other. It seems that some folks seem to think that the new branches of government are the governor, the El Paso County Board of County Commissioners, and the health department. That's not where we are. We're in a circumstance here where we have to react to what the governor does. That's the charge that's been put forward to us. And we could say, hey, churches, go do whatever you want to do. Well, then maybe they're open to some sort of other scrutiny from the governor's office that we didn't understand or anticipate. Maybe they put their nonprofit status in jeopardy by engaging in some sort of behavior. So we're in a position where what we're trying to do is operate within the scope of the authority that we have, which means applying for variances. That's what we can do. That's what our capacity is. That's what our capability is. And I'll tell you, we're doing that as absolutely expeditiously and as safely and as judiciously as we possibly can. I'm hopeful we do this. We don't have any issues, and that means we get to go to the next step. And we don't have issues there, which means that we get to go to the next step and the next step. And then we have this county up and operating as soon as absolutely, possibly as we can. I appreciate tremendously all of the work that has gone into this. I appreciate everything from our health department, from our medical director, from our deputy medical director. I appreciate the way the faith-based community has taken this issue on and worked hard to make sure that they're able to exercise that freedom of religion and exercise the necessities they need to do for the folks that frequent those churches, but I appreciate also that they're doing it in a way that best protects the parishioners that come to those churches as well. I think this is the move that we need to be making. I think we're where we need to be, and we're doing the things that we need to be doing right now. And I'm pleased that we have this, and I'm pleased to be able to vote on it today, and I hope the Gov turns this a little quicker than he did the last one. So with that, I will call the roll. Commissioner Brummer.
Aye.
Commissioner Vanderwerf.
I will vote in just a moment. One last comment. I do want to thank Cause I Love You for the work that they did in this. Cause I Love You, for those that don't know, is an association of dozens of churches in our community. It's a community faith group. And I would particularly like to thank Yemi Mobilata and Stu Davis, the executive director, because those were the folks that I worked with in trying to get this pushed through in a place that we can have a successful vote on it. And they've been a pleasure to work with, and it's been my honor to be part of that process early up front. I vote aye.
Commissioner Williams.
Aye.
Mr. Vice Chair. Aye. The chair votes aye. That passes unanimously. Congratulations on all the excellent work.